Most people are so blinded by the distractions of modern society that if you just learn how to make yourself immune to instant gratification, then you'll quite literally become one of the most dangerous people walking. Now, I say this as somebody who's went from being super unhealthy, super undisciplined, to being shredded, to quitting alcohol, breaking my social media habit, and also leaving my 9 to 5 to live in Portugal. You see, I'm seeing society fall deeper and deeper into this trap of being perpetually distracted by the most nonsensical things that just don't move people's lives forward. In fact, they often make people's lives objectively worse because it makes them less capable, less disciplined, and way less likely to follow through on the promises that they make to themselves. Now, I would go as far as to argue that everybody has at least one problem in their lives that if they solved it, it would make their lives infinitely better. But since they're not focused, they're living in mediocrity when they have the potential to be elite. Now, I know this because I have been there before. Years ago, I was on this consulting team and, working on this client engagement. And throughout that project, we had these peer reviews where we'd give each other feedback as a group. And one time my review was so bad that I began to think that something was actually wrong with me. I felt like my brain just couldn't function properly. Like I couldn't stay on task. I couldn't find the motivation to follow through on my work. I kept forgetting things. So as soon as that project ended, I went to see a psychiatrist who basically told me that I have a pretty serious case of ADHD. And that was what was causing all kinds of problems in my life. I didn't want to take ADHD medication. So I went down this rabbit hole of figuring out how the brain works and how I can set up my lifestyle in a way that helps me to, avoid the problems that are commonly associated with ADHD. But the more that I dove into it, I realized that my problem, it ultimately boiled down to dopamine management. I realized that almost every preventable problem that most people experience in their lives is also a dopamine management problem. All right. Now, if this doesn't make sense, then make sure that you stay tuned because in this video, I'm going to break it down for you. We are living in a dopamine economy. Now, maybe you've noticed it, maybe you haven't, but the world that we live in today, it's flooded, absolutely flooded with sources of cheap dopamine. The economy relies on people to buy things that they don't need and to spend time on platforms that monetize their attention and, to indulge in activities that cost a lot of money sometimes, but don't necessarily advance their lives forward. Now, this is done by manipulating people's dopamine reward system. I'm not going to break down the science of dopamine here because there's like plenty of information that's out there about it already. It's all over YouTube, but just know that your dopamine reward system is what motivates you to do things, regardless of whether that thing is good for you or not. So society is always trying to rewire your mind to their benefit by getting you hooked on their service, on their product, on their idea, right? Whatever it is that they want from you. And this is why food companies, they use engineers to craft the perfect flavor profiles because they know that it gets people addicted. Social media platforms, they use tactics like variable reinforcement, which creates this slot machine effect of some of your posts going viral while others fall flat. In fact, most of them will fall flat, but they'll give you that occasional hit of one post being really, really successful, right? It's literally the textbook example of how to get people hooked. And this is also why when you sit down at, say, a nice restaurant, the wine glasses, they're conveniently just sitting there looking sleek, looking elegant, practically begging to be filled with wine everywhere you go. And in every direction that you turn, your mind is being bombarded with things that trigger a dopamine response in the hopes that you take action, in the hopes that you get hooked, and in the hopes that you keep coming back for more. The world is overloaded with cheap dopamine, and most people are overdosing on it. Now, this is a really big problem because abundant access to cheap dopamine, it pacifies the mind. People who are dealing with really strong addictions, they'll sometimes sacrifice almost everything to satisfy that need for that thing that, brings them instant gratification. And to a lesser extent, This is what's happening to society with all the scrolling, with all the drinking, all of the infinite entertainment, the excess comfort. So the more that we align with these things, the more of our lives we're willing to sacrifice for them, which means less focus on the things that bring us true and lasting satisfaction. So that constant inflow of cheap dopamine, it short circuits the reward system. It literally kills motivation to pursue rewarding things in life that are, well, they're difficult to accomplish because they require delayed gratification. They require discomfort. They require, uncertainty. And this is why so many people, they can't even stick to a diet or a training plan for more than just a few weeks. It's not about discipline. It's not about willpower. It is about their reward system being corrupted. And this is also why people struggle to do basically anything in life that's worth doing. Whether it's finally getting control over your health or leaving a really unfulfilling job, to start a business or something, or putting effort to build deep and meaningful connections. This is what I mean when I say that almost every preventable problem that most people have in their lives is a dopamine management problem. When you lose control over your dopamine, you lose the one thing that'll motivate you to take decisive action towards actively moving your life forward in a positive direction, right? So the modern world, it's full of cheap dopamine. We've covered that already. And excessive cheap dopamine, it pacifies the mind. That's the big takeaway here. Now, with that said, dopamine detox is one of the most underrated life hacks for unpacifying your mind because it makes you dangerous. I honestly hate the term dopamine detox because honestly, it's played out, but I don't think about this in a way that most people probably do, right? I'm not thinking about just unplugging for a while and then going right back to your old ways. When I think about dopamine detox, I think about actively rewiring the brain, literally tapping into the subconscious mind to make delayed gratification your default mode of operation. So think about your computer's operating system and going in to change that base layer code to fundamentally change how your computer functions. Just think about what happens to your life when you actually rewire your brain to be averse to your most self-sabotaging habits. What if you build an aversion to scrolling on social media? What if you build an aversion to consuming alcohol or indulging in constant comfort day after day after day? Like, what if you develop a taste for doing what everybody else isn't willing to do, to delay gratification? If you can do this, you will absolutely change your life. And this is why I think everyone should be doing some form of dopamine detox very frequently to keep their reward system regulated and to keep it functioning properly. Take some time out of your life to intentionally step away from the noise, to intentionally step away from the nonsense that's been normalized in society today. This will literally make you dangerous because it separates you from the status quo and it gives you a competitive edge, not only over the average person or other people, but also over your own self, over your lower self. All right, now let's quickly go over how to detox your dopamine. And this is a topic that, well, it warrants its own video really, but I'll just leave you with a super, super high level process for properly detoxing from cheap dopamine rather than all of the fluff out there that doesn't actually affect change. Okay, so number one, understand your purpose and identify the sources of cheap dopamine that are most misaligned with your purpose, with your goals, and with your vision for life. Number two, calculate the lifestyle impact cost of each source of cheap dopamine, and then prioritize them. And from here, you can focus on the top three. So you start with the most impactful, and then you move down to the next impactful, and then the next impactful. Number three, build anti-desires that begin rewiring your mind to be naturally averse to your most self-sabotaging habits. Number four, leverage the process of elimination by removing all triggers so that it is much harder to indulge in cheap dopamine. Number five, replace dopaminergic activities with other deeply purposeful activities that align with your vision, with your goals, and with your ideal future. Number six, fully and totally immerse yourself into information environments, physical spaces, and social circles that amplify your efforts. And lastly, number 7, create a system for long-term sustainability that keeps you locked into a delayed gratification mindset. Now, I will elaborate on this process a bit more in the future, but if you do follow a simple process like this, then you'll be way more dangerous because you now have the recipe for overcoming just about any challenge that's holding you back. And there's nothing that society can throw at you that will knock you off your path, as so many people are. And most importantly, you'll become immune to the cheap dopamine that is pacifying the masses, that is pacifying people's minds, right? So if you do this, you will have the formula for controlling your dopamine. And what I always like to say is, if you control your dopamine, you control your life. All right, that's all I have for today. Check links in the description below for resources and for the 7-day dopamine detox protocol. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.